the creative element of what's happening in Chicago. What's happening technologically? Where are we in a competitive sense? And what are some of the innovations that have happened over the last, say, 3 to 5 years that have really transformed the world of new media? And is there any one of those things that is unique to Chicago or really came out of Chicago? Jason?
So we built something called Ruby on Rails, which is a
customer, a couple of customers.
So Ruby on Rails is a web. Yeah, right.
She was the biggest client.
Oh, really? That's cool. Is a web-based application framework that makes it easy to build web-based applications and web-based software. And we open sourced that. And we did that, and there's also another thing in town called Django, which is a web-based framework for the programming language called Python. These two things, Ruby on Rails and Ruby on Rails and Django, are truly changing web-based software, which is truly changing the software industry. And they're both based here in Chicago. Also with Ruby on Rails and the Django guys here in Chicago with Adee and Holivardi and some other guys. Incredibly important stuff that's going on here. Again, you don't hear much about it in the Chicago media, unfortunately, but I hope we do hear more about that. But those two things specifically are really incredibly important to at least my business, which is software.
And I think in the news business, Django, the guy that developed Django, Adee Holivardi, has a new business built on Django called everyblock.com. That's one of the most innovative news products out there, and maybe one of the most innovative, since the invention of radio. It's a journalistic site with no reporters. It's all based on computer journalism. It's all based on scraping databases and other news sites to pull address-specific news. So you put in your address and you get a news feed. Restaurant licenses, restaurant inspections, real estate listings, news stories, crime, every publicly available data point you can think of. Adrian is one of the most respected and highly respected journalists operating, and he's a code writer.
Yeah.
So I think and he's here. He lives in Lakeview and runs a business on South Wabash with 4 guys.
Yep. Adrian is great, but there's some great people like that in this town that we all need to pay more attention to because they're truly innovating. They're really changing things.
To pay attention to them, here we have 2 major media moguls here.
Right.
Their goal is to sort of look at these areas. Your job is to cover it more than Bill is to sort of create some of the new templates as well. But I mean, are those people getting enough exposure? We have one report here that they're not getting enough exposure. What are the vehicles where they're going to get that? Is it all online stuff? Is it word of mouth? I mean, the tremendous success in filling this hall tonight. Congratulations to you to do it in 9 weeks. But again, I didn't see a lot of traditional PR for this. But I assume that word of mouth and on the internet was significant because the seats are filled.
Well, as for Adrian, he is terrific, and the Tribune companies begged him to come join us, and that would be great. And I've met with him several times. He's truly created a new class of journalists, and there's going to be many more folks following in his wake. I don't know, I always sort of brace myself on, not enough publicity and things like that in his field. Jason and Adrian I think are well known, and I come from sports, so I take calls from the White Sox fans saying the White Sox don't get enough publicity. So it's all, and maybe they don't. So I don't know. It's hard for me to answer.
It's a tough thing because we're trying to appeal to a fairly broad section, and we're a much narrower section of readers than Bill is dealing with, and we're still. You got to think of what's relevant to the most people. I think if you're in that position and you've got something really great and innovative, I think look at what Jason and David and those guys have done, you know, have you guys ever used a PR firm?
No, we don't use PR.
And everybody knows about you guys, and you guys have been written about in every business magazine I can think of. You know, and I think not only by you know, having a great product, but also by going out there in public and with your blog and talking about not just your business and your products, but ideas. And that's, I think that was a really, really good insight to be out there and telling about things that are of interest to a lot of different people, not just that specific to your business.
Sure.
I give that advice to a lot of people running small companies.
If I can add one quick thing then.
No,
the reason I think it's important for these guys to get a little bit more publicity is because it encourages other entrepreneurs in town to stay here. A lot of people, there's a lot of flight going on. People say, I can't build a business in Chicago, I need to go to the coast to get money. First of all, you don't need money to start a business. You just need an idea and some hard work and you'll be all right. But sorry for any investors out there. But you know, I think highlighting some of these great success stories like Threadless, like Adrian's stuff, like Chicago Crime, which is the first thing that Adrian did, which is incredible, will encourage more entrepreneurs to stay here and to think that they can actually use this city and the resources the city has to get the word out about their ideas, their products, and actually be successful here.
Yeah, I think that's,
Marshall?
I think Brandon makes a really good point about Jason's efforts to publicize his ideas and speak out and have a point of view about here are good business practices, here's how you innovate, here's how you work smarter and better. And I think maybe as a city, we could be more vocal, and I think we don't need permission, and no offense, but we don't need, we could create our own stages for doing that, like, you know, John and company did in 9 weeks to do this, and maybe that's a good inspiration.
Well, also, in a lot of cases, it is the recognition of what's happening in Chicago that makes it significant nationally. In other words, when the New York Times says that something is important in Chicago, it becomes important nationally. Even when we talked about, you know, the creativity of the Chicago School of Television, it was when Fred Allen, who was one of the great radio performers of all time, who was involved in fledgling television, he was the one that said from the pulpit of New York, hey, we've got to go to Chicago to see what they're doing out there because they know what to do with this new thing called television. So, you know, that type of recognition, I know just the other day I was actually online, I was looking at the Hollywood Reporter came up with the 50 most significant people in digital media. Well, I didn't see any of them from Chicago. 95% of them were from Los Angeles. So there is an insular sense that they have that, you know, they're close to the power as they see it now because there's a lot of content out there. So I guess another question I would have is, as new media looks and sort of claws its way to not only define the new landscape, but to look for the content that will turn, you know, the customers on, if you will. Where are you getting the content? Because you're involved in, you've got heavy content that you're dealing with, Jason Coyle.
Well, can I actually
You can say
finish
whatever
off
you'd like.
the last point? You know, to go back to Bill's comment about that maybe we're in Chicago, we're too, we have too much humility. We're too, hey, we're just going to do our jobs the best we can, and you know, that's enough. Yeah, it's too bad that we're not showing up in these top 50 lists. I think it is fair to say without reservation that the Chicago community has the foremost expertise in the world when it comes to made-for-mobile video. And it's not just Intersport. The first made-for-mobile video with real budgets that ever was done was 3 years ago, and it was a partnership with us and one of your board members, RDS, Resolution Digital Studio. And we produced over, now between us, over 10,000 made-for-mobile shows in 15 months. And it's not just the quantity. We were recognized by the National Association of Television Programming Executives this past January as the winner in their first ever mobile content awards. That was out of Chicago, and it didn't really get much play. And maybe it's up to us to really start to trumpet ourselves.